Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov gang. Tonight, why ISIS beheads. We have a very special guest with us this evening, Don Perlmutter, the director of the Symbol Intelligence Group and one of the leading subject matter experts in symbols, symbolic methodologies, unfamiliar customs, and ritualistic crimes. She designed and developed Jihad ID, a symbolic database of the signs, symbols, and identifiers of global jihad. And we are also honored because she is a contributor and columnist at frontpagemag.com. Don Perlmutter, what an honor and privilege to have you on the Glazov gang.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
Thank you very much, Don. You do fascinating work, very profound, and of course very informative and crucial for people to know. Let us begin. Westerners are shocked. Many of them are shocked when they see ISIS beheading people. Your profound work is telling us that we should not be shocked at all. Let us begin with that. Why should the world not be shocked when Islamic terrorists are beheading their victims?
The main reason that people shouldn't be shocked is that it never really stopped. This has been going on for since the predecessor group to ISIS, which was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Really, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was the first one to sort of formally ritualize these beheading videos, and that was in 2004, and there have been literally hundreds of beheadings since then. The only difference with ISIS is that they've sort of added a high production technology to what they're doing, and they are getting it out through technology that wasn't available at the time, like Twitter and Instagram, and there's just hundreds of these beheadings.
Thank you, Don. And what's so important here in terms of social media, this is a very twisted, surreal, horrifying world now in terms of how social media has got involved. And you write about in your articles at Front Page how this is obviously a new propaganda tool, and that ISIS and these other Islamic jihadi groups are being very successful in attracting Western Muslims into the global jihad by actually showing beheadings and all this horrifying imagery. Can you talk a bit about that, about this new propaganda tool, and perhaps why it appeals to Western youth? Or, you know, older Muslims or jihadists?
Absolutely. The beheadings serve several functions. They function on different levels. One is the way Westerners perceive it as psychological warfare, which is quite disturbing and instills fear. But probably the more significant function is that it's been a fabulous recruitment tool. Ever since they started doing this in 2004, they have inspired many young men, Westerners, who are just attracted, I think, to the kind of badass style of it. They're attracted to the fact that it's resonates with an authentic form of Islam. It's a warrior type ethos. It appeals to this heroic sort of human trophy hunting aspect. And I think it's also become a way of pledging allegiance, actually earning your stripes, similar to gangs, and which is really happening very, quite frequently right now. There's been several groups in just the past month that have decided to pledge allegiance to ISIS by beheadings. An Egyptian group in the Sinai Peninsula has done 2 beheadings, one just 2 days ago with 3 people, the first one with 4 people. There was the beheading of Hervé Gordel, the French tourist and that was by an offshoot of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. Again, that's their way of earning their stripes and joining ISIS. And now we have even an Afghanistan Taliban group that has decided to behead 15 people while carrying the black flag of ISIS, which is unusual. So this has become the latest phenomenon, this idea of we're not only recruiting, but now it's like, I want to prove to the world that I've joined ISIS, so here's my video.
Exactly. And Dawn, in your article, which all of our readers and viewers should read at frontpagemag.com, quote unquote, beheading raises Islamic State street cred. Beheading raises Islamic State street cred by Dawn Perlmutter. Look it up on frontpagemag.com or just do a Google search. But Dawn, you point out that in doing these beheadings on videos, etc., that they're making good on their threats to kill, and that the Islamic State is raising its quote-unquote street cred. And as you're saying, this is all about gang codes and being part of a gang, etc., etc. And why this is so important to understand is that while they get their street code, we have Obama saying that this is not Islam and being afraid to actually name what's happening. And in many ways, he's seen by them as a punk in many respects, because the gangsters, part of their gang codes, really see this as weakness, right?
Absolutely. The Obama administration has such a fundamental misunderstanding of how to respond to these videos, both tactically and in terms of counter propaganda and information warfare. They really should be treating it the same way they treat anti-gang units. Everything is about respect and disrespect. And this is an honor-shame culture to begin with. The idea that to lose face, to be disrespected, has to be dealt with, or else you have no credibility. So when Jihadi John, for lack of a better expression, the executioner in the past 4 videos, those videos are not as much about the beheading. They're significantly different than all of the other beheading videos in that they don't show the murder. What they're showing is this Jihadi John calling out President Obama. He's literally waving the knife in the president's face, disrespecting him, and saying that if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm going to kill the next person. And they absolutely make good on their threats. If they didn't make good on their threats, they would be dishonored among the other jihadists.
So Dawn, what we're seeing here is, on the one hand, these terrorists who are operating, as you're documenting, by all these gang codes and Islamic rituals, etc., getting their street cred, and they're saying, for instance, Allahu Akbar, praise Allah, etc., etc., and we're doing all of these things because of Sharia, because of Jihad, because of Islam, and etc., etc., and the person that they're talking to is responding by saying, this is not Islam, this is not Islam. This is a catastrophe, right, Dawn?
Absolutely. You have to name your enemy. There's a concept of magical thinking that's very important in these types of cultures. And the idea is that to name something, to have the true name is actually the concept, is to make it appear, to deal with it. So if you're too afraid to even name your enemy, that shows even more weakness. It's almost like the expression, speak of the devil and he will appear. That's how the administration is handling this. Like they're even afraid to call it up, or they'll have to deal with it. The other aspect of magical thinking is denial. If you don't name it, then you don't have to deal with it. And they're insisting on their name. In fact, they're upset when you won't even call them by their name. So it's really symbolically such an expression of weakness not to name your enemy. It's almost like not even wanting to get in the ring and face them.
And as you write, fear of naming something represents actual fear of the thing itself, right? So it's showing our side's cowardice when our leader is actually afraid to even name what the enemy is naming itself.
Absolutely. Every one of these beheading videos and all of the president's responses, there's a whole subtext with gesture, with wording, and every gesture, every expression that President Obama chooses to use is always the wrong choice. It always demonstrates weakness instead of strength. And we're literally being laughed at. I mean, it's almost as if they're showing in a way that they fulfill their, when they draw a red line, they act on it. Yeah. That's a tribal honor culture. That's how they're going to respond.
Dawn, you document and crystallize the absurdity and the catastrophe of this whole think again, turn away campaign coming from Obama and our media, et cetera, and you write about how Obama's policies are based on the fallacy of belief in the universal characteristics of human nature, that all people are inherently good and strive for the same things. And that the fallacy here is that, somebody like Obama, he can't comprehend beheadings or terrorism or oppression, etc., in that context, because he only sees it in Marxist terms, that they're beheading because maybe they didn't get a fair share of the pie or they were oppressed, and we just have to change that, and then they're going to do what we like to do because all people have the same desires. This is catastrophic, right?
Absolutely. It's a fundamental misunderstanding. It's always applying a Western behavioral analysis perspective to a culture that doesn't have those values. We cannot, the Think Again, Turn Away campaign is almost laughable. It basically, first of all, there's the ethical dilemma of retweeting the same images, the violent images. Essentially, the State Department, which uses its emblem on these, that's probably the first mistake, it retweets violent images in the hope that Westerners will see it and say, oh, think again, turn away. Like you don't want to join a group that's doing this type of violence, when they actually are attracted to that kind of violence.
Absolutely.
So there, again, there's just, it's almost like living in Disney World. And to even put the State Department emblem on these videos they're making and the retweeting, I can picture them almost laughing behind the scenes at this kind of thing. It's really, it's not dissuading anyone. They don't understand the target audience.
Thank you, Dawn. And also I want to stress there were some times where I was quoting a little bit, but also summarizing Dawn's views and then throwing in some of my own. So it might have been a little bit confusing, but we're getting the main themes across. And again, encourage all of our viewers to go read Dawn Perlmutter's articles at frontpagemag.com. We're wrapping up here, but I really want to end on this powerful note that you're talking about. And again, you write about how the hundreds of potential British recruits interpret this leftist language and this language coming from our media and Obama of all this denial and the fear to name names as quote-unquote punk-ass fear unworthy of respect. And so from their point of view, they're naming names, they're making their threats, they're calling it as it is, and that's how they see it in terms of gang and street cred. They see Obama and what the left is doing as kind of punk-ass unworthy of respect, right?
Absolutely. It's almost as if you were speaking in terms of gangs. Here you have, it would be like ISIS is the Bloods, and they're out there in your face, and Obama is like Crips hiding behind a rock or something, won't even come out and name or who their enemy is. There's just no. It's a respect and disrespect is so important in terms of language, in terms of gestures, in terms of all of these State Department campaigns. It lowers our credibility. Everything lowers our credibility. And again, I think you're absolutely right. It's coming from this academic leftist perspective where they think people are fundamentally good.
And that we all want the same thing.
Exactly. They cannot comprehend a very tribal, primal culture where people will say, that's fine. I have my trophy head. Here it is right here. That makes me stronger than you.
Yeah. And Dawn, in our family's background, my parents were dissidents in the former Soviet Union. We understood the evil of the KGB and the evil empire very well. And it's just terrifying and depressing for us to witness, for instance, how Obama would deal with a Putin. Because when Obama gives those accommodating gestures and surrenders here and there, people like Putin just see that as weakness and something to be taken advantage of, not to give something back. So we see some analogies here, right?
Absolutely. It's always the weak. I don't think, it's not just a misunderstanding. I don't think there's anybody advising on how to, even how he stands and walks up to the podium. Every single thing has meaning. Everything is coded. There's subtext. Instead of this appeasement kind of response to these beheading videos, we need somebody like Liam Neeson to say, we're going to hunt you down to the ends of the earth and kill you and kill your entire family. That's the kind of response they would respect.
So if you were giving a grade on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being an A+, 1 being lower than an F, to mark how Obama is dealing with the ISIS threat and with the jihadi threat, what score would you give?
It would be less than 1. There's just no comprehension of how to message this or how to even respond tactically.
Dawn, for you, just on a personal level of a scholar who has studied all of this and has documented, the foundations of Sharia and of jihad and Islamic symbolism and signs and all of this stuff, how do you feel when you watch Obama speaking?
Oh, I just cringe. I can't even explain how upsetting it is to me. I literally am sitting there cringing, and every time I think it can't get any worse, then there'll be some other statement that it makes it 10 times worse. It's as if there's no learning curve.
Yeah, and Dawn, he represents, of course, the surrender very much of our culture overall that the left dominates. Of course, not truth tellers like you, and I'm trying to fight, and we've got many warriors on the front lines like David Horowitz, Nani Darwish, Brigitte Gabriel, Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer. We have truth tellers and warriors, but we are in many respects marginalized, and we're kept out of the media. I mean, Dawn, you're not often invited to CNN or MSNBC to tell these truths, right? So my question is, what do you think has happened? The left has taken over. There's an overall kind of surrender on our part. What's happening?
it's not just surrender, because I don't think they see it that way. It's almost like a collective groupthink denial. They just want to remain living in this sort of la-la land where there's this denial of wanting to believe that people can be fundamentally violent, that there are groups that want to dominate, that want to rule the world, and that, it's not Disney World. They just don't want to believe that there's this kind of violence going on.
And this causes a tremendous price, or for us to pay a tremendous price. Dawn Perlmutter, what an honor and a privilege to have you on the Glazov Gang. It is an honor and a privilege to have you writing for Front Page Magazine, and I hope you will be coming back on the Glazov Gang and continuing to write for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you next week on the Glazov Gang. Good night.